Yo guys, what is going on? Blossom's back and welcome back to the episode of Top Drives. Now, I am a very curious person and I like to compare things and I like to know things that I care about, basically. Like, I don't want to say I just like to know things. I don't just like to know things because I don't want to know anything about math and science and the majority of academics. I was always really bad at that stuff anyway. But I love to know things about Top Drives, and today I want to put 3 of the biggest updates we've ever had together and see what do they bring to the table, what do they offer for the players. And honestly, when I was making all these slides, I learned a lot about these 3 updates and how, in a funny way, they're all kind of different from each other, which is actually a good thing. This is things that, honestly, I don't notice when we're looking at a brand new update as an update in itself. Like, if you just look at European New Wave, you're just like, oh yeah, it's all Volvos and Skodas, you know. And if you look at World Expo, it's like, oh yeah, it's all Audis and Porsches. And if you look at Asia Pacific, it's all like, it's just Hyundai and Mitsubishi. Like, but like, honestly, like, when you compare all these 3 updates together, you get to see that they actually kind of go hand in hand. And sometimes, you know, when one update is lacking in one niche, the other update is actually, you know, pretty vibrant, like it's flourishing in that niche. So in today's episode, I want to be comparing, well, not really comparing, but kind of just like contrasting the 3 biggest updates we've ever had in Top Drives: European New Wave, Asia Pacific Grand Prix, and of course World Expo. The only 3 updates in the game that has surpassed more than 300 total cars in one entire update. So with that said, let me turn on my camera and let us begin. All right. So here we go. Let's talk about update sizes. European New Wave brings in 320 cars. Asia Pacific Grand Prix bringing the biggest update of 366 cars. And of course World Expo, which was the biggest update of its time when it came out last year, with 333 cars, the first update to surpass 300. I do think that the pacing of new cars being added to the game is borderline too quick. Not even borderline, some might even say it's just way too quick. Think about it this way: the last 2 updates that we've had are Asia Pacific Grand Prix as well as European New Wave. That is 366 plus 320. You can do the math, but I'm pretty sure that is almost 700 cars. That's about 386 cars. 686 cars added in just about the last 5 months. All right, remember, APGP came out at the end of July, so in the last 5 months we have been given almost 700 brand new cars. Now, I think the pacing of that is way too quick. I remember about World Expo. After World Expo, we had Amalfi Coast and Into the Black Forest, which were significantly smaller updates compared to World Expo. So yeah, but anyway, these are the 3 biggest updates that we've had in Top Drives ever. So let us get into the comparison. The first thing that I want to compare, just in general, what are the 3 best cars of the update? As you can see in European New Wave, it's going to be the prototype Goodwood thing, the fan car, the Automobile Pininfarina Battista Anniversario, and the Pininfarina Battista. All 3 cars that surpass 100 RQ. APGP was a little more lackluster in a sense where the top 3 cars wasn't that interesting in my opinion. It was 104, 99, and 99. The main thing is, like, when your top car is an all-surface tire car, it just doesn't bring the same amount of hype, or whether, you know, if it's compared to, like, if your top car is an off-road tire car, just mainly because Hyundai, like, the off-road, like, not off-road, but mainly for the Hyundai Genesis, it's a bit of a conundrum. I think this car, you know, it's a really high RQ. It's not going to perform as well in the dry as your slick and performance tires, and it's not going to perform as well in the off-road scenarios as your off-road tires. So all surface tires are always at a disadvantage. So I do feel like, you know, out of all the updates, I would say that the top 3 cars, the weakest, I guess, representative, what am I talking about? The weakest representative of the top 3 cars, in my opinion, would probably have to go to APGP. The Brabhams as well, we don't know too much about it in the Mazda R124. We don't know too much about that as well. World Expo is a little bit older because the Audi R10 and the Lotus Evija have both been given out, and they're both ridiculously fantastic cars. The R10 TDI obviously is a fantastic twisty car, as well, and you know, this is before the R18, which came out and entered the Black Forest. And Lotus Evija, the car speaks for itself if it's a 146 MRA. We don't know too much about the Rimac E-Runner being the highest RQ car from that update, but if we look at the stats in general, it's pretty fair to say that the Goodwood from our most recent update is the best car. But yeah, anyway, moving on now to our standard tire representation. Once again, this includes in a general sense, so prize cars and non-prize cars. Just your top 3 standard tire cars from all the updates. We start with the Volvo and the Citroen, whatever the hell that thing is, and the Skoda Superb. So that's a very, very weak showing, I would say, from European New Wave. None of those standard tire cars are very impressive, especially when you compare it to APGP. Look at the handling numbers, for example. A lot of people give the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 8 RS over here a lot of stick because it didn't turn out to be as good as the Lancer Evolution 6 RS, which is true. But at the end of the day, it still is the second best car in this entire comparison, and it handles way better than anything that European New Wave, or whatever it is, could provide. 76, 76, 75, compared to APGP's 83, 84, 82. Now, moving on to what World Expo has to provide, no legendaries. However, from the epics alone, they all trump the Skoda Superb hatchback. I really don't think that the Skoda Superb hatchback is going to be a really good car. We already tested the MRA on this, by the way. 78 was the answer, which is just not impressive enough. Moving on now, the best all-surface tire cars from the last 3 big updates, and as you can see right here, European New Wave, again, kind of lacking in that department, only 1 legendary to its name. APGP doing a little bit better with 2, but of course World Expo has 3. In terms of the best possible car, though, APGP does have the best car with the car from New Zealand, the Kiwi Hyundai Genesis PM580, followed by the Hyundai Veloster, and then the Citroen Xantia, I think if you pronounce it correctly. But one thing to note is that the best SUVs do come from World Expo. The SUVs, as you can see, very weak showing from European New Wave, and also as weak of a showing from APGP, to be honest. So yes, I would say that the World Expo has its own strengths as well. Moving on now is going to be the best off-road tires, and as you can see over here, there's a little bit of a progression on how off-road tire cars have just been getting more and more OP as updates progressed. A year ago, I remember when the Ford RS200 Group B rally car was released, it was like one of the best cars ever. I remember seeing that, and I immediately wishlisted it. It was a 98 RQ 4-wheel drive off-road tire car. At the time, cars that could reach that pedigree of handling and 4-wheel drive and off-road tires, I think is very few and far between. It was only the Escudo at the time that could hit those numbers, and before that, the Escudo and the Ford RS200, before those 2 cars, or after those 2 cars, are the Lancias from Italian Renaissance. But since World Expo, I guess the benchmark for an off-road tire car and top drives has just completely shot through the roof. These WRC cars are changing the entire meta, for better or for worse. They're making all surface tire cars worse and worse and worse because off-road tire cars are getting better and better and better. So obviously the next update with APGP, we saw the introduction of the Hyundai i20, which was a car that I wanted a lot, and I was really sad when I didn't get it because it was the first off-road tire car that could get 100 handling. That being said though, who the hell cares anymore? I'm sorry if you're on the Hyundai i20 WRC because you've been done dirty. You've honestly been done dirty. For only 2 weeks this car has been released, and now we have the Citroen C3 WRC, which has the same handling on the lower 0 to 60. I don't know why there's a 5 RQ difference. I can see the C3 being the better car. Obviously, I don't want to call it too quickly. We don't have the time to compare both of the cars, but I think it's safe to say that Citroen C3 will be better unless it has like 1 MRI or something like that. They have the same handling. And then moving on with the Skoda Fabia, right? 90 handling, and the Citroen C4 at 88 compared to APGP's Mitsubishi Lancer, also with 88 and a lower 0 to 60 to be fair, as well as the Hyundai i20 with 101 MRI and 89 handling. So that's a very good one as well. So yeah, World Expo kind of falls to the back seat with their representation of off-road tire cars, but at least we can see a nice gradual update and progression of basically the off-road tire meta from update to update. Now let's move on to the non-prize category. From every single comparison you'll see from now on will not include prize cars, and basically I just put any kind of requirement under the roof to see like what if there are any discrepancies or any what patterns or anything like that. But anyway, we'll start with non-prize. So top 3 non-prize from the 3 updates, right? World Expo, you have your Porsches and the Hennessy Venom GT. So nice and balanced. You got 2 super twisty cars or basically hybrid cars. Then you have the Hennessy Venom GT, which is just a drag monster. I would say that the best car in this entire comparison goes to APGP though, with the Hyundai Genesis PM580T. This thing is just ridiculous. It kills everything, honestly. It's one of those cars cars where like it's just a little bit like underestimated because Hutch doesn't want to give it a higher RQ because they're like, oh, it has a top speed of less than 200, it can't be that good. But actually, it's ridiculous with that super low 0 to 60 and really high handling. Actually, you know what? It went up in RQ in this most recent update, so I think it is better. I think it used to be 95. Now it's a 98. I think it's a lot more fair. The Brabhams though from APGP seem to be massive disappointments. They've got good MRA, but their 0 to 60s are just too far off to even be competitive. You know, so unfortunately, I don't rate the Brabhams too much. And the Radicals, we don't know too much about the Radicals. Obviously, all the cars that you see from the European New Wave side are all completely brand new. We don't have the MRA numbers. We don't know how they really perform against, you know, some of the Porsches and the Hyundais and the Brabhams and all that kind of stuff. But they look good. They look good. They handle very well. They're all very light. The Zenvo is quite interesting actually because it almost has identical stat to the Hennessy Venom GT, 27 and 91, but one has a slightly lower top speed. I would assume that the Hennessy Venom GT has better MRA, and it's not just the higher top speed in the Hennessy Venom GT that makes it 1 RQ more than the Zenvo. But then again, we don't have a lot of MRA times for those cars. Moving on to the best epics that these updates have to offer, and as you can see, very bad showing from European New Wave. Not a single 79 to the update's name, and not a single 77 to the update's name. In the top 3 non-prize epics to European New Wave is a 78, a 76, and a 75. When it comes to APGP, 2 belong in the 79 category with the Mitsubishi Lancers, and then with 78 in the Hyundai Ioniq. And then moving on to World Expo, there were a lot of 79s to choose from. I gave World Expo the best shot at 79s. In other words, I did not represent World Expo with 79 RQ Audis because they're shit. But I went for what I thought were the best. There's Ronnie B's Alpha X, Celine S1, and the Porsche 911 Carrera 4 Cabriolet to represent that 4-wheel drive, low ground clearance niche. And, you know, like I said, like you can see like the cars kind of complement each other. Like World Expo brought a lot of low ground clearance performance tire cars to the game. APGP brought medium ground clearance cars to the game. And, yeah, to be honest, I don't really know what European New Wave brought to the game besides the Caterham Super 7 2000, which is fantastic. Everything else is kind of just like, yeah. Alright, anyway, moving on. Ultra Rares, what are the best Ultras that these updates bring to the table? World Expo brings the Zenus E10, the Lotus Elise SC, and the Audi A1 Quattro. Now, these are some brand new RQs for our APGP boys, because the Mazda Atenza and the Mitsubishi Lancer, they used to be like 59, but they've all been bumped up to 64, and rightly so, because they're really freaking good. The Mazda CX-90 as well has gone up because it's a very strong standard tire car. Honestly, I would rather take the 64s from the previous updates compared to what European New Wave brings to the table, which is, you know, 2 really crappy all-surface tire cars. Not to say that they're crappy all-surface tire cars, but all-surface tire cars are generally just weaker than performance and standard and slick and all that kind of stuff. And the Volvo S60 as well. I mean, it looks okay when you compare it directly to the Audi A1. I think that they should be, you know, on the same table. The Audi A1 handles a little better, but the Volvo, you know, has a lower 0 to 60. So I think that's, you know, that's fair. That being said, though, talking about 4-wheel drive medium ground clearance cars, let's not forget that the Mitsubishi Lancer and the Mazda Sweet Atenza do exist right in the middle, and they are, well, I would say better, especially in the twisty scenarios. Maybe when it comes to the faster tracks, the Mazdas will be a lot less useful because of their lower 0 to 60s, Mazdas and Mitsubishis, because of their, or weaker 0 to 60s, I would say. But yeah, they definitely do deserve to be 64. I think that they are not overrated anymore, or I don't think that they're overpowered anymore, these 2 cars. I think that they deserve where they should be as, you know, the pinnacle of ultra rare performance. Moving on now, super rares, what do they provide? Again, not very interesting stuff coming from European New Wave besides the Caterham 600, which is a really cool 90 RQ standard tire car that is incredibly light at 460 kilograms. I have that memorized already. Super rares from APGP were a lot more diverse. There was a 4-wheel drive performance, there was a front-wheel drive performance with low ground clearance, and there was their off-road tires. And then you have World Expo, which again was just mainly low ground clearance performance tire cars that handle pretty well, decent hybrids. And then you have a Ford Fiesta, which is medium ground clearance and it handles pretty well as well. Now, moving on to more random niches, I decided to put them up against each other with the best saloons from each update. Top 3 non-prize saloons. Again, I'm quite surprised at the pretty bad showing from European New Wave. Considering that you have a lot of saloons, mostly represented by Volvo, they couldn't even get to the legendary status, and the highest that they could get to for the non-prize category was to service an RQ65, which is a really bad, you know, showing compared to the last previous 2 big updates, which brought legendaries across the board. Obviously, APGP could bring the Mitsubishis, you know, some really strong standard tire medium ground clearance cars cars as well as the Mitsubishi Lancer Evo, which is okay. And then you have, the low ground clearance. Again, like World Expo, which is a lot of low ground clearance performance cars from the Mercedes-AMG GT4, the Porsche Taycan Turbo, and of course the Audi RS3, which is medium ground clearance. But yeah, I'm just kind of surprised from all the Volvos and all the saloons that Volvo has to offer, they couldn't even get past Epic. Well, one Epic. They couldn't get past one Epic. Now, moving on to non-prize wagons. This is where a little better showing. APGP was the weakest one here with no ultra rares, only one Epic and 2 super rares. There were 3 epics come from European New Wave, but all of them are low end, 68, 66, and 66, which are cars that many players would not be interested to upgrade at all because they have very lackluster stats for very, well, I wouldn't say interesting. They're not interesting cars. They're not bad cars though. I don't hate them. Again, I don't hate Volvo. I don't hate Skoda, but they are a bit monotone and a bit boring, especially when they come in like the numbers in the hundreds in this update. And then you have the Porsches, right, from World Expo, all legendary, and obviously some of the best stats in the game, especially the Taycan Turbo, which is, I believe, still the best city street small non-prize legendary or non-prize car in general in the game. Moving on to another niche, we have SUV. Again, I thought that, for an update that brought a lot of SUVs, I mean the most out of any update, that Volvo, or not SUVs, but all-surface tires, I thought, European New Wave would have a better showing than this. But yeah, all they have is the XC90 at 74, they have the XC40 at 72, and the XC40 at 72, compared to APGP, which actually brought an off-road tire car, which will blitz everything in the off-road track sets that European New Wave can provide. And of course, there were the Cayennes and the Macans that came in World Expo. So the only update to bring legendary performance SUVs. Moving on now is going to be front-wheel drive, and again, as you can see, World Expo for the first time is the weakest representation with only 1 ultra rare and 2 super rares. I would say the strongest probably goes to APGP, at least in terms of like rarity. The APGP was able to provide 3 epics. Now, I know rarities aren't everything. I'm just taking the top 3 from what the update has to offer, basically. And then last but not least, we have European New Wave, which, to be fair, brings a very, very interesting selection of front-wheel drive cars. We have the Skoda Felicia, which is going to be a really amazing handling front-wheel drive off-roader. We have the Citroen Zahra kit car, which is also going to be an amazing handling off-roader. And then we have the Citroen C3 Max, which is kind of like the Giulietta TCR, whatever it is, but just a little bit better than that. Moving on to non-prize, I believe, rear-wheel drive. And as you can see, it's a bunch of cars that we've seen before. It's basically the best cars that you can unpack that are non-prize. Now, moving on to non-prize 4-wheel drive, and I would say that the most interesting stuff, in my very biased opinion, probably still goes to World Expo because I love Porsches. But I would say in terms of value and how much you can get in the game, I would say it's probably in between APGP and European New Wave. Like I said, they complement each other. APGP brings a lot of, really meta standard tire cars, but they also bring some pretty good off-road tire cars. I mean, some of the best off-road tire cars before the introduction of, this brand new update in European New Wave. But European New Wave brings the best of the best in terms of four-wheel drive performance, at least the pinnacle of four-wheel drive performance, at least. There are a lot of bad four-wheel drive performance. Like, I would still say that the four-wheel drive European New Wave pack is a terrible pack, because outside of the really good legendaries, you're just going to be, suffering with all your Volvos and your SUVs and all those Skoda all-surface tire cars, the ENIACs, whatever they're called, right? Like, yeah, but like, in terms of the high end, European New Wave brings some really, really game-breaking shit, like the Citroen C3 WRC. Moving on now, is going to be non-prize 2000s. Again, radicals that represent European New Wave, a mix of Mitsubishi and Hyundai from APGP, and a completely different mix of cars from World Expo with the Ultima, the Arash, and the Celine. Again, I would say that the European New Wave brings slick tire performance. World Expo brings low ground clearance performance tire, which I'm now starting to feel like was the entire update. World Expo was just low ground clearance performance, which I do enjoy. And then obviously APGP brought, you know, those off-road tire performance tire cars, which are also very, very fun to see. Now moving on to non-prize pre-2000s, the top three. I would say that World Expo brought the most diversity and also the highest rated cars in the Porsche 956 and the Porsche 936, and of course you had the Audi V8, which was also a saloon with very good performance. You have things, you know, from European New Wave. The Skoda Octavia looks pretty good. It also is a saloon, but it kind of drops off pretty far, going to 76 in second place and then 67 in third place. That being said, APGP was pretty good, brought the Mazda 757 and those two really strong standard tire saloons as well that we've seen a lot in this update. Non-prize 70s cars, APGP and European New Wave about the same, one ultra, one rare, one super rare. Nothing too much to really take away. Also, what I just realized is that both their ultra rare representations from the 70s are both off-road tires, and I will say that I'm definitely a lot more interested in the Skoda 130 than I am in the Mitsubishi Lancer, mainly because of that 3 extra handling. World Expo kind of is in a category of its own, bringing the only epic and legendary 70s cars that we've seen from these 3 massive updates. Remember, there are almost 1,000 cars between these 3 updates, and from that, there's only one legend and one epic non-prize 70s car, which is the Porsche 936 and the Ford GT70. Moving on to another comparison, non-prize 4-seaters. As you can see, I'm just throwing in random requirements here and there because I'm just curious like that. European New Wave, 2 ultra rares and a super rare. APGP, 1 epic and 2 ultra rares, and of course World Expo with all the Porsches, 3 maxed, you know, really high-end legendaries. Moving on now, we're going to be comparing non-prize front-wheel drive standard, and again, APGP showing the highest rank, like setting the bar for front-wheel drive standard tire cars in big updates, I guess, or at least within these 3 updates, with 3 ultra represented cars. We have European New Wave with a very lackluster amount of Volvos, 71 handling and 73 is not a good showing, especially if the Audi A6 actually handles better, which is a bit of a shame. World Expo doesn't bring a lot of exciting stuff to the table, but ironically they do handle better than what European New Wave has to provide. But the Ford Mondeo looks okay with a 78, but we need to remember that we can see 78 from APGP in the Mazda 6, which isn't even represented over here because it is a super rare and not even in the top 3 within, you know, that niche. Moving on to non-prize rear-wheel drive performance ultra rares, and as you can see in the entire update, 300 plus cars, European New Wave only has 2 ultra rare performance tire cars. That is ridiculous. With, you know, ultra rare performance tire rear wheel drive cars, with the KTM 7 and the Bizzarrini. APGP brings the Hyundai Genesis and the Holden HSV, and of course World Expo brings the Cayman, the Elise, and the ever so amazing Zenith E10. Now moving on, we're switching it up from rear wheel drive to front wheel drive, non-prize front wheel drive, and this is where World Expo shows its weakest showing. The only thing it has to provide for the ultra category is the Ford Focus ST. Nothing else. APGP is the most diverse, bringing in a saloon front-wheel drive and SUV, I believe, front-wheel drive, and a hatchback front-wheel drive. And then of course we have European New Wave, which, you know, also brings a decent selection of front-wheel drive ultra rare performance tire cars, but I would say that the nicest selection still goes to APGP. Moving on, we have non-prize top grip, basically the cars that handle the best. These are some of the best of the best, and as you can see, I would say that the best would probably go to European New Wave, mainly because they handle almost as well as the Porsches, but they are lighter than the Porsches. So when the going gets tough and the twisty gets really twisty, I think the Radicals are going to beat those Porsches. Obviously the Porsches have, you know, more MRA probably, or maybe not, we don't know that, but they definitely have more top speed. But those Radicals are going to be very useful cars, which is a bit of a shame because I actually really enjoy using my Porsches and my Müllers and my Boateng and all that. APGP lacks in this. The Hyundai Genesis kind of carries it for it, but everything else kind of lacks. Honestly, APGP high end is just a Hyundai Genesis, and it tries to carry carry everything else. In terms of non-price top grip for epic performance, it breaks it up a little bit more. APGP has that front wheel drive, basically representation from the Hyundai and the Mazda 3, Before the highs of 92, all slick tires. World Expo, all performance tires, the Porsche GT3 being the highest handling car with 92, and then you have the Caterhams and the Radical coming from European New Wave. European New Wave definitely brings the lightest cars, and World Expo, being World Expo, bringing that performance tire, low ground clearance. You love to see it, man. Now, moving on, we have a non-price performance medium ground clearance. This is like the last niche that I'm going to be comparing, because I've already compared a lot of niches today, but if you guys want to see more niches to compare, like, let me know down in the comments below if you want to see it. Again, we can see updates kind of complementing each other. European New Wave isn't that strong in medium ground clearance performance tire cars, but World Expo is, with the legendaries, and obviously APGP is doing pretty well as well, the legendary Lancer and the epic Lancers. But again, I'm very surprised and quite disappointed. I would think that from European New Wave, some of their strongest niches would be saloons, wagons, and just medium ground clearance cars, because that's kind of what I expect Skodas and Volvos to be. But unfortunately, those are the areas which they actually suffer the most in. And from what I realized is that most of the best stuff that you see from APGP, not from APGP, but most of the best stuff that you see from European New Wave are not from the brands that got the most cars. When you think of European New Wave, you think of Volvo and you think of Skoda. They got the most amount of cars. But when you look at the best cars from those updates, they're usually not even Skodas or Volvos. They're usually Radicals or Zenvos or even the Citroen off-roaders, for crying out loud. The difference from European New Wave to World Expo, so when you think of World Expo, you think of Porsche. And when you look at the best cars on the update, they are the Porsches. And it's the same thing with APGP to some regard. When you think of APGP, you think of Mitsubishi, and a lot of their best cars are Mitsubishis. So that's kind of one thing to really take into account. Like, that was one thing that I definitely saw, like, as a pattern when I was doing all these comparisons. But anyway, that's gonna be it for today. So let me turn on my camera. So I'm back. The camera's back, and whether you might like to see it or not. But of course, that was a nice little contrast of the biggest updates that we've ever had in Top Drives. Each update, I would say, brings their own pros and cons, and they all brought their OP cars. And honestly, although European New Wave is my least favorite of the three, European New Wave still brings a lot of fantastic cars. And I think that the only difference between European New Wave and why I like it less compared to Asia Pacific Grand Prix and World Expo, besides the really obvious bias towards I have the really obvious bias I have towards like Porsche and stuff like that and Hennessy, is that European New Wave just brings about 50% more filler and more garbage than Asia Pacific and World Expo did. World Expo did bring a lot of garbage, to be fair, the Audis, but European New Wave, in my opinion, just brings the most amount of trash. And that's kind of why I'm not that interested with that update. But anyway, guys, that's going to be it for today. Let me know down in the comments below if you agree or disagree, or if you want to see more comparisons like this in the future. Anyway, I hope you guys have a great day. I'm going to stay safe, wash your hands, blossom out. Peace.
Bro, this song just makes me so happy.
Me too.
Imagine being Asian in the 50s, looking nifty, leather jacket, looking sleek, look like Presley, look so deadly. Got a jukebox back at home, feeling jazzy, turn it on and play it slow, like the movies with the ladies.
They so fine.
Imagine being Asian in the 50s, looking nifty, leather jacket, looking sleek, look like Presley, look so deadly. Got a jukebox back at home, feeling jazzy, turn it on and play it slow, like the movies with the ladies.
They so fine.
Sit back, relax in my Bonneville Pontiac. Hold tight all night, cruise to Jacksonville.
Atlantic.
Blonde